It's in the name.
Welcome in to the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast. On today's episode, we'll be sharing a question and answer with myself and Jeff Jenkins from a recent Christ Over Cancer event, Day of Hope at Woodlawn Church of Christ in the Shoals area there in northwest Alabama. We'll get right to that Q&A right after these important messages. This episode of the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast is presented by Faulkner University. Faulkner University is a private Christian liberal arts university based in Montgomery, Alabama, with a mission to provide an education anchored by not only intellect, but also character and service. The Faulkner experience aims to educate the whole person. Every individual matters every day. We all want to become better versions of ourselves. No one wants to remain trapped where they are because of missed opportunities and unrealized dreams. At Faulkner University, we believe your dreams don't have an expiration date. We understand that you're looking for more than a degree. You want to find your niche and thrive in your career. Whether you're a high school senior just beginning your trek or an adult student looking for a better path, Faulkner is here to help guide your journey. Go to faulkner.edu to apply or get more info. That's faulkner.edu.
Well, thank everybody for coming today. As Matt said, we've done these for several years. This will be the first time we've done it in this format before. But so Christ Over Cancer came out of many years ago of a need to get information and a way of encouraging people to have hope. And it's just something that we found that was lacking. And so the church here at Woodlawn took on that ministry. And the books that you see out front, I think we've given away probably over 2,000 to date. And we have a website, ChristOverCancer.com. And our whole purpose is just to encourage people to have hope in times of cancer when there's a lot of despair there. So that's what our mission is with this ministry, nothing less. But today we invited these two wonderful men to come and speak with us. First we have Jeff Jenkins. Jeff has been a preacher for more than 45 years with degrees from Faulkner and Freed-Hardeman. He served as a minister to several congregations and currently works full-time for the Jenkins Institute. He serves on the board of trustees for Freed-Hardeman, Lads to Leaders, as well as other advisory boards. He's also an accomplished author, and he and his brother Dale founded the Jenkins Institute to encourage preachers around the world. Jeff has 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and he married Laura Colley, who sadly passed away from cancer in 2019. And so Jeff will come from the perspective of a caregiver, watching someone that you love go through cancer, and that's an important role that often gets overlooked with cancer. And then we have Travis Creasy. He preaches, teaches, parents, co-hosts podcasts, and rocks the social media world. He's married with 2 awesome kids, Haley and Daniel, and his wife, Whitney. He's the pulpit minister for Riverside Church of Christ in Fayetteville, Tennessee, and is a former coach and campus minister for Riverside Christian Academy. Now, one of Travis's biggest accomplishments is defeating leukemia. His battle has inspired him to share the message of Christ and hope with the world, and he has also written a book with his wife, Whitney, that is available in the lobby today. So thankful for you guys for coming. And what I wanted to do today was is just more or less have a conversation with you and go through some questions, because I know that when I was diagnosed, I was thirsty for certain things, and I would meet someone that had cancer or had defeated it, and I was just wanting to know, how did my experience compare with their experiences? And then I know we have some caregivers here that they would like to know, as a caregiver, how do you deal with that? So I'm just going to ask some questions, and we'll just kind of go one at a time and let you guys answer it, if you will. The first one would be, what were the first thoughts that you thought of when you heard cancer diagnosis? In other words, what flashed through your minds in those early days? Jeff?
Well, first of all, I'm delighted to be here and appreciate you all for what you're doing here. I think this is a tremendous blessing. And then I want to say, wow, those guys are outstanding, by the way. My wife was, in 1995, she was 23 years old, and she felt the spot when she was just getting dressed one day, and she went to the doctor, and the doctor told her that she had breast cancer. And of course, I didn't really understand at the time what breast cancer was. I didn't understand very much about it. We were both shocked and scared to death, like most people would be. She was, like I said, she was 23, and we had two small children, ages 5 and 7, and then she had to go through a lot of treatments, different treatments over the next 10 years and surgeries. And about a year of her life, she was in bed, because people who know when you go through like chemotherapy, she was doing it every 3 weeks. And the first week, she would be completely out. She couldn't get out of bed, hardly couldn't raise her head. And the second week, she could get up a little bit, and then the third week, she could get out, and then it was time for the treatment again. And so I would say our first reaction was we were scared to death. We didn't know what to do. We didn't know what was happening. We had no family. We had just moved to Oklahoma from Alabama. All our family was over here. We didn't know anybody really out there, but we were blessed with a wonderful church family, and I may say more about that later. But our first reaction was shock and being afraid. Yeah.
Okay. Travis, how about you?
So I think that the emotional part is actually something I'm still working through right now. When I first heard, I just was hoping that there was a plan, right? And, my wife was like, how did you hear all that and not have some emotional reaction? But my head was actually like 1,000 miles away. Like, as long as he says that there's a plan, I'm good with this, right? Like, we can get through it. And it's just now, 6 years later, in 2018, actually this week, like today, 6 years ago, we were at a Vanderbilt football game in fall break, which we're just coming off of, and was having some issues there and didn't feel real good, and just had this gut-wrenching thought, this feeling that something wasn't right. We went to the Titans game on Sunday, and just eventually on the way home, finally, I was like, I got to call a doctor, and went in, and they sent me down. But, it was really weird, because I don't know, you think that you're ready for that somewhat, right? And you're sitting in there, and it's a possibility, because I was at the Cancer Institute. So it was like, and I didn't really know that that's where I was going, because it's at Crestwood over there, in the same building is the maternity building. It's the same one, right? Yeah. So I'm sitting there going, what am I doing here? Obviously, right? There's nothing. But then you get in the place they sent you to, Cancer Institute. Yeah. And so it was kind of at that moment that it kind of finally hit, like, this is a reality. But I was coaching football at the time. So I was like, we got to hurry up and get back for a middle school football game. I mean, that's what we got to go do. And so really, I guess initially it was just kind of like, really? Well, as long as there's a plan, as long as he comes back in here and he's giving me some time, there's a process to go through. Right. And really, so it was almost like emotionally, I just put it off. And it's now 6 years later where, these guys get up and they sing a song that I listen to every morning in the hospital for 5 weeks, like the Johnny Cash version. So it was a little lower, but, that hits you and you're like, oh, thank you, Lord, and kind of things like that. And so it's really interesting now. It's more about on the back end, kind of processing the feelings and emotions. So I would say I wasn't emotional at all, really, when it hit. And I would say it's not because I was some strong human being. It was just like my mind went, this is going to be a long thing, and almost like kind of a good thing that it'll be a long thing. But eventually that catches up to me, and I'm like, this is never going to end. I'm never going to be right again. So.
Yeah, it's like when you have to, we look at the future, it's hard for you to see it because everything's so uncertain, but it's day to day. And if you have a plan for, okay, we're going to do this week, and we're looking for this next test, and you're living for the next test. So I understand. So tell me about your treatment, like not the treatment itself, but what helped you endure the treatment? Was there a blessing during the treatment that stand out? Because we know that with chemotherapy, we know there's a lot of nausea and lots of trips, but what helped you to deal with it?
Well, part of that plan was he told me, you need to, at first they were going to send me home, and you're going to come back tomorrow, and you need to plan on being weeks in the hospital. You're going to be here for 5 weeks. You'll go home, get your stuff. And they did a biopsy, and my blood was so thin they couldn't get it to stop. And so he said, you're going tonight to the emergency room. And so there was no going home. There was no seeing the kids. It was straight to Huntsville Hospital. And interesting enough, it ended up being about 86 treatments. So I did a bunch while I was in the hospital for 5 weeks, and then it was 5 days a week when I got out for 2 or 3 hours a day. And so I didn't have the radiation, but I did have the infusions, transfusions. I got my fact checker out there somewhere. And so it was the church. I'll just say that. I had a little bit of my own stubbornness, but when I was in the hospital, it was boxes of envelopes of people writing me from all over the world. And so it's really that CYC family. And, you've got people coming in and they're going, who are you? Because we don't know you, but you've got to be somebody, because nobody gets this many boxes of envelopes. Like, do you play music? Do you do stuff? And I was like, I'm just a goofball, and I've got this church. And you had people the doctors and nurses wanted to come in my room because we'd just take all the envelopes and, all the mail and post them up all over my wall. And you had nurses coming in and going, I like being in here with you. And it wasn't because I was some great patient. It was because of the encouragement of the church. And so I tell people, and you guys obviously have taken that very seriously, like, if you are sparse on finding people to help, find a cancer ward somewhere. Because I had people in and out of my room constantly, and I would go for walks around that floor, 7th floor of Huntsville Hospital, and there would be people that no one ever darkened the door of them. And so I got through it because of the people who would come see me, send me messages, send me letters. And I'm like, man, if you want to reach people for Jesus, send them letters. Like, there's nothing, like, people may look at a card ministry and go, oh, that's not that big a deal. It was for me. It was a huge deal. People I didn't know, so that was one thing for sure. Obviously a great caregiver, the fact that I worked at a place where people donated their time away from work so that my wife could be there with me every step of the way. And Mom was there for a long period of time. Not being alone and knowing that I'm not by myself in this, because that really was a game changer.
Was there a blessing that stood out with Laura?
Yes, I would say, first of all, I agree completely with what Travis said. The church was huge. We had just moved from Alabama to Oklahoma. We'd only been there 1 month, and our family was all here. Some of our family could come out, but they couldn't stay that long. And these people in this church, they didn't know us. They didn't know who we were. They didn't really know that much about us, but they treated us like family. And I remember, this is odd thinking about this now, but there was a lady who came to our house one day, and she brought my wife 5 like pairs of pajamas. And she said, I've been through this, and I know that sometimes when you think about washing clothes and you're wearing these same clothes and you're wearing them all the time, and I want you to have to do that. And she said, I'm going to come over here once a week. I'm going to pick them up. I'm going to wash them for you. And she did that for like a year. And that's kind of an odd thing that somebody would buy you pajamas, but that meant so much to her. And I would say that what helped me get through, other than the church and faith, would be the faith that my wife had. She was an amazing individual. She had an amazing amount of faith. There would be days that I would get down. I was 25. I was starting a new job. I was trying to take care of her 2 children, and her faith was stronger than my faith. And so faith is indispensable when you're dealing with something like this. But her faith, like I said, was stronger than mine. And that helped me when I would feel really down, and to know how strong she was.
Yeah, I can remember with my wife, I would look at her and I would gauge how she was. If she was up I would be better. So I understand, the caregiver perspective, even opposite of what you're saying. She probably looked at you, and that probably helped her too, more than you ever realized. Uh, can you look at your battle with cancer or your wife's battle with cancer and say, tell me anything positive that came? I know it's hard to say, but in my life, I've known a lot of positive that came from the 2 bouts that I had with it. So can you think of anything positive?
Well, I would say that I believe strongly there's a verse of scripture in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. It starts in about verse 3, and it says that the God that we serve, the God of mercy, is also the God of all comfort. And that verse says he comforts us in all of our afflictions. The God of all comfort comforts us in all of our afflictions so that we can comfort others. And I have a good friend that does grief seminars, and I do grief seminars, and his saying is, don't waste your pain. And so I think what came out of watching my wife deal with cancer she dealt with it for 23 years, off and on. Most of those years were good years, but particularly those last 18 months before she passed, was that there are people who came to me from the church and said that y'all's strength during that time helped make our marriage better, for instance, and we spent more time together, because I would often talk about the time that we spent together. And I went to the elders and I said, I'm not going to be able to work every day like I have maybe in the past. We had been at Louisville for 15 years, and it's a beautiful church, and they were very good about that. And I had people say that helped our marriage. And then out of my wife passing away, I was asked, it was back during COVID, to do a video for a Wednesday night series. It's kind of like a hope series. And I was asked to tell the story about my wife and talk about that. And out of that, we wrote this little book called Beyond the Valley of Death. And out of this, we do seminars now for churches. And so my prayer is that my experiences, that I can use the comfort that I receive from other people to bring comfort to others. And so I would say to people who have survived cancer and people who are dealing with somebody with cancer now, to take what you've learned and don't keep that for yourself, but share that with other people. Everybody in life, I believe, has a story. And I think oftentimes we don't tell our story enough, and I think that's crucial.
That's great.
I would agree. I would say that I've learned that being a cancer survivor is hearing the words that you have it or a loved one does, and putting the next foot in front of the other. Whether you beat it forever or you don't, you've survived that. Right. And the ability to learn to do that, to put one foot in front of the other, despite the bad news. And I go to the scriptures as well, Romans 8:18, that the suffering of this current time doesn't even compare to the glory that we will inherit or have. I would hope, my hope is that I'm a more compassionate person, that I see people suffering and hurting, and I'm moved by that. I know that I'm more emotional about it, right, for sure. My wife may disagree, but hopefully in the last 6 years, I've been more compassionate, hopefully a better minister, lowercase m, or big case m, uppercase, whatever, to see people as people, and that every person has something that they wish was better in their life. And to desire to at least do no harm, and at best help them, to see that all hope is not lost. And I wouldn't have written a book had one of my doctors, some of y'all may know Alan Baggett, but he bullied my wife and I into writing this book because he was like, man, there's just something different about y'all's approach. And I think some of it is because I have sang goofy VBS songs in front of people all my life and preached the word. And, you preach about suffering, and then, you can't you can't back away from it. Once you've preached a big, long sermon for 20 plus years, you got to live it out. And so certainly positives there. Anything that makes us more compassionate to our fellow man is a benefit to the kingdom. So.
And I think people are watching us as Christians all the time to see when you go through a situation like cancer, you say you have faith, but how do you live it out? And I think that's important for us to know that someone is always watching us to see how. And so that's good to hear the positives that you can bring from it. With cancer, you always have a lot of what ifs. What if it comes back? What if this happens? And even sometimes in the middle of it for sure, but even when you're in remission, you have a lot of what ifs. So Travis, how do you cope with those what ifs?
Well, we had a big what if as soon as I was diagnosed. We had 2 kids that we were fostering through the state of Tennessee. And of course, I was going to be in the hospital in Alabama. And so you get that point where you've fallen in love with them. And so, it's interesting. You're on your way to the emergency room and all you can think about are these 2 kids and the their life has already been turned upside down on multiple occasions. But, the what ifs, and I'm blessed to say that it's like a 10%. Like once they catch what I had, it was a 90% cure rate after they hammered you. I mean, that's the words he used. We're about to hammer you. We're going to hit you hard. And, if you've got any issues with inner organs, like those are things we're going to have to deal with. We're going to hit you with it here, and then we're going to move on to something else. And so, that 10% still out there. And once again, with compassion, it also makes you appreciate I'm kind of 6 years out. So sometimes I even fall into that lax, but it's every sunrise, every summer rolls around, every fall. And it's like, you just squeeze everything you can out of it, and you go, hey, this is a gift. And that's cliche. And once again, I fall in the same trap. I'll get up tomorrow and I'll go to work and I'll just assume I'll get up and go the next day. But there is that part in there. I think the difficulty, we go to Huntsville, we drive down by that hospital. It's October, it's raining outside, all the things are lined up the same way it was, and you have that moment. And there have been times where driving the car, hey, I think I'm going to have to pull over and let you drive, honey, because, you just have those similar smells or things like that. And so for me, it's more those things. It's kind of that, the perfect storm lines up, and you have these things that kind of trigger you, and you go back in that moment, and it's breathing. You go back to breathing in through the nose, out through the mouth, and you have ways of coping with that. Obviously, prayer. Lord, I don't understand what's going on right now. I don't know, but I know that you do, and you're my hope. And really staying grounded in that. And it's difficult. It's really easy for me to get back in the grind of things, and everything's just kind of monotonous and going about my business. But then you see somebody who's been diagnosed, and it's like 2 things I deal with is like, oh no, I'm going to pray for that person. But then there's an aspect of survivor's guilt. And I feel selfish even bringing that up, because here's a person who's still in the midst of it. But you deal with that. Why do I get to run around and do what I do and have the fun that I have and raise my kids and do those things? And so it's a constant battle that you take to prayer, and you go, all right, Lord, you got me here help me not to miss that lesson. Yeah. Help me not to miss the lesson here, and to be compassionate for those people.
So I think for somebody who has helped take care of somebody who did not survive cancer, the what if questions become what now? What do I do now? And in our seminars, we talk about 2 sessions about what we wish everybody understood about death, and then we talk about how do you move forward. And I think the biggest question for somebody who has been a caregiver, I know a man who's been caring for his wife who has cancer and who has Alzheimer's for 20 years. And I'm thinking, one of these days it's going to hit him. She's not going to survive. And his biggest thing is going to be what I do with my life now. I've been dedicating my whole life to taking care of this person. And when my wife, cancer came back the 3rd time in 2018, the doctor told us she probably had 2 years left to live, and so we spent every moment together that we could. And when she passed away, it was like my children were there, then they had to go back to their homes where they were from, and it's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. What do I do now? And so it's finding a place in your, what some people call your new normal. How do I get through this, and how do I use this? How do I let God glorify Himself through this, and how can this be something that can be of help to other people? And I've known people who start organizations and start a card, like you were talking about earlier, card ministry, and they make bears and things for people for children who are dealing with cancer. And you got to find something to do to, number one, to honor God, and then to honor the person who is passed on. And so I think that big question is what next, what now?
Just making sure you don't waste the suffering. Don't waste the pain. That's true. And you were mentioning sometimes we always say, why me? And I remember in 2011, we had one of these Day of Hopes, and we had a speaker that had cancer. He was in the middle of battling it, and he said, I don't ask why me, I ask why not me. And I've never forgotten that, because we're really no different than anyone else. Why should we not deal with this pain and suffering? And so he impacted a lot of people that day just from his unselfishness. So I think of that. So let me start with you, Jeff. How has it changed your life today?
Well, the fact that my wife didn't live has changed everything. My life, I tell people my life changed dramatically. Everything about my life. We had this plan, what we were going to do with our life, and we'd kind of said we'll keep doing local ministry until I turned 65, which would be this year, and then we would kind of take a secondary role in the church and do some preaching on the side and maybe do some traveling. And when we had that initial discussion, even with our shepherds at church, probably 10 years ago, it was like, that's way out there in the future somewhere. And this is our plan, and this is the way our life will go. And when she passed away, it changed my relationships. We had friends that we would go to eat dinner with, that we would go on trips with. And, when you don't have your partner with you, that makes it completely different, and they don't know how to act, and you don't know if you want to go. And so it changed everything about my life. It changed, kind of drastically changed my future and what I would do with my life. And so it changed everything about my life. And I will not say that I cannot say that I love that's definitely not what I wanted to do, but you come to a realization that to survive and to try to help others and to try to glorify God, this is what I will do. This is what I will do. So changed everything.
Just an acceptance of this is a new role that God has planned for me, and I have to find that purpose in this new role. How about you, Travis?
Well, I grew up most of my life trying to ignore any bad thing. I don't know if anybody can relate. In the scriptures, some of my least favorite books, Lamentations is not appealing to me. Ecclesiastes is not really appealing. Job was not really appealing. But it has changed my perspective completely. I hopefully mainly for the good. But that word hope is so different. Speaking to brother talking about his plans, it changes the plan. It absolutely has changed the plan. And there's a reliance, there's a heavier reliance on God. There's a heavier reliance on the church. I fell in love. I thought I loved our local church there at Riverside. And man, now, I just love those people. and I love being around them. And, they would call in while I was in the hospital and let me preach from the hospital room on the phone. And, when I barely could talk, I had the energy to talk. And man, that's just changed. The plan is the plan. We still have plans, but every bit of it is a little more, if the Lord wills, if this is, but your hope is so somewhere else. And, my selfishness is like right in front of me. The two things that reveal my selfishness the most is being a foster parent and leukemia. And they both happened at the same time. And man, I just see my selfishness. I see all those things. And, they're more of God is sitting on the throne, like he is real, and Jesus is the right hand of God, and he's in control. And the things that happen to you, it's really your response to those things, that we have a opportunity to respond to those things with praise. And I really don't think there's anything that hurts the devil more than when the thing that could crush you, instead of it crushing you, even if it's a dirge, even if it's responding as David did, oftentimes questioning what's going on, or Job, but to lean more into him. Like, even though he may slay me, I'll still ask the questions, as Job says. That trust in who God is, and that it's not about me. And I need that. I need that reminder every day, that it's not about you. You're not the hero. You're not the superhero. You're not the main character. And really, it's been a load lightning reveal that it's not about you, it's about him. And what can I do today to be his servant more, no matter what this day looks like?
Yeah. I want to add one other thing. Travis was talking about, it's the response, I think is the word you said. I have a friend that preaches out in Texas, and one day we were just he came to see me, and we were just riding around talking, and he said, "You know what this is, don't you?" And I said, "No, please tell me. I don't know what this is." He said, "This is a test." And he said, "Throughout our life, there are going to be many tests that come into our life. And God doesn't necessarily cause those tests, but God allows them to happen. And the question is, how are you going to do? How are you going to respond to the test? How are you going, will you pass the test?" And the more I've thought about that, the more I'm convinced that that's exactly right. And so sometimes tests will come into our life that will be very minor and will be kind of nebulous, and they're not a big deal. But then, then you get slammed by a big deal test. And the question is, can I respond in a way that that will glorify God and that will help strengthen through your example other people?
When I was diagnosed the first time, I'd been teaching class on James, and it was about the testing of your faith. And that was the first thing I thought about was, oh, so this is a test. I talk about this. Am I really going to act out what I teach in class? So
at school, just a few weeks before, and one of my students sent me this in one of the letters they sent me a few weeks before my diagnosis. I said, what really matters is if one day you're laying in bed and the medicine they're giving you could kill you, what do you do in that moment when what they're giving you could hurt you, or you could come out of it, but you don't know the outcome? What are you going to do then? And sure enough, he remembered that and put it in his letter. And I was like, I did open my big mouth, didn't I?
Last question. So years ago, I've always been kind of like this song. Brad Paisley wrote a song, "If I Could Write a Letter to Me." This is the things that I would say. So I think about that, and I thought we've done a series on that here before with Crossover Cancer. But if you could go back and give yourself advice at the beginning, knowing what you know now, if you could go back and give yourself 1-2 pieces of advice, what would it be? What would you tell yourself all those years ago at the beginning of this cancer journey? Jeff, I'll let you go first.
I think, I think that's another question we often deal with when we lose somebody close to us is, what could I have done different? Did I do the right kind of things? And And looking back on my life previous to Laura being diagnosed the third time with cancer, I would say I wish I had been more. I would like to be more attentive. I would like to focus more on our marriage and strengthening our marriage and being the kind of husband that God would want me to be and that she needed. I go into restaurants sometimes. Well, actually, I go into restaurants all the time because I eat all of my meals in restaurants. And I go in restaurants and I see a family sitting around and I see them, everybody's on their phone, everybody, there's 5 people there and they've all got a phone and they're all looking at their phone. And sometimes I see a man and his wife, I assume, and they come in and they'll both be on their phone. And I'm thinking, that's what I did a lot of times. Hopefully that God gave us that time where I was able to correct some of that. But what I would say to myself is what I would say to all the husbands who are in this room. When you go sit down for a meal, put your phone down and look at your wife in her eyes and ask her about her life and get to know her better. And don't wait until you get a death notice. Don't wait for that to happen. And so, and I would say to myself, something that Travis said earlier, I think I'm more conscious of people who have lost their spouses and people who are dealing with cancer and being more compassionate. And I wish I'd have learned that a long time ago too.
I would, some of y'all know Michael Rosenblum. Like the first day I was sick, he came in, he was like, "Hey man, you need to start writing stuff down. Like you need to write down." And I never did that. And I had plenty of time to do it. But I think I was a little scared to feel, I was a little scared to not feel all the stuff because I felt like if I got down, I would never get back up. And so, that would be the first thing, to write. And to be honest, like I said, I've really fallen in love with the Psalms and David's open and honesty with what he's feeling, and the other writers of the Old Testament that, I'm feeling this, they always kind of come around back to the end like, well, you're still God and you are who you are. And that's why I feel comfortable in saying this. But, just processing stuff, I think, I was just so much about being where my feet were, which is a good thing. I'm not saying don't do that, but I think there were sometimes I just kind of bottled it up and soldiered on when I think it would have been beneficial to everybody, even if they saw me down, to let them know that, yeah, I do feel rough. I don't feel great. I don't feel awesome today. Because I think that can be as much impactful, if not more, than anything. That, hey, so-and-so has a rough day. I can be allowed to have a rough day. But I would say write down everything you're feeling, even if it's wrong. And there have been plenty of times I've had conversations with Whitney where I'm like, I know this is wrong-headed thinking. I know this is not of the Lord, but I need somebody to hear this. Like, I need it to be out. And I'm sorry for the ignorance that I'm about to spew into the world, but I need somebody to hear it and to understand that God is big enough to handle all of your anger. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given it to you to use. He can handle all of your emotions. In fact, that is a level of faith and maturity that he wants us to have, right? To be able to go to him no matter how we're feeling. You can do that respectfully, but that's a level of vulnerability that God desires. It's called relationship. If you haven't had those conversations with people, you probably don't have many relationships. And so that would be the thing, like, feel all the things, don't withhold things. Now, maybe there'll be some people that don't need to hear that. Maybe your caregiver doesn't need to hear that today. But man, I had a text group that I felt like I could fire off a text and be completely wrong-headed. And they were not going to give me a pep talk. They weren't going to try to talk me out of it. They were just going to sit there and read it and let me pity party for a while and wallow in it, because they knew at the end of the day I'd come out the back end of it being better. But I would say just to feel it all, to let your emotions run the gamut, because if you bottle them, they're coming somewhere. They're going to blow up somewhere. And usually for me, it's at the worst possible time. And so kind of let that pressure off time.
Well, Travis, Jeff, thank you both for opening up, for sharing. I know some of these may be some wounds that you're picking at by going back and answering these questions, but I think you've helped everyone here. You helped me, and we're videoing this, so you'll help countless people in the future just by your honesty.
I echo what Jeff says. This is amazing. Your church, the church here, should be commended for doing this because it's uncomfortable. I'm sure there are things that are said that are like uncomfortable, but we're not really called to be comfortable in this life. God is the God of comfort. I don't want to get that wrong because it's absolutely true. But to gain the ultimate amount of comfort from him and his hands and feet here on earth is to be uncomfortable and be vulnerable. So I appreciate the opportunity to share, and hopefully I didn't embarrass Whitney too much. Hey, parents and young adventurers, are you ready to embark on an extraordinary journey? Introducing the Adventures of Ben and Travis and the Worry Coaster, a thrilling ride through the ups and downs of mental health in our new children's book. Join our dynamic duo as they navigate the twists and turns of their emotions while discovering the courage to conquer their worries. Pre-order your ticket to adventure now at benandtravis.com/books and be among the first to embark on this roller coaster of resilience. Let's turn worry into wonder and empower kids to embrace their feelings with bravery and hope. Buckle up. It's going to be an unforgettable ride.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.